Meet Eric Robinson, actor, producer, and CFO of Face Off Unlimited and one of the creators of BATSU, a live improvised Japanese-style game show.
For most actors, improv is a tool in their belt, not the path to fame and fortune. However, over the past 13 years, Eric and the folks at BATSU have established themselves as a staple in New York, expanded to Chicago, and will soon be taking their show to Edinburgh, Scotland.
Welcome to Scratch, Claw, Push, a podcast about artists clawing out a place for themselves in the world. I'm Billy Jo Cones.
And I'm Brendan Duke. Let's go.
Hello.
So full disclosure, you two have actually been connected for a while. So how did
Connected
who wants to take that one?
Do you wanna tell the story, Billy?
No, you go ahead, because I love hearing from other people, like, their first recollections of me.
Sure. I would say we were teenagers. I mean, we're definitely teenagers, but we were, I don't know if it was like 16, 17-ish, definitely high school. And we were cast together in a production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat for community theater. And we were both ensemble cast members, and I was super new to theater. As a matter of fact, I think that might have been my second play that I ever did.
Really?
Career.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I was a total rookie. Living, it was all brand new and exciting and sort of foreign to me.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow I think it was like in like the note sessions or like the sessions of like the post rehearsal wrap up kind of things that we always just kind of found ourselves in this small little core group of people that began to socialize outside of the production. And that's where it started, and it just never ended. We went on to stay friends through high school, and then we went on our own paths, but maintained a connection over the years. And there are countless stories in those 3 years that we had spending a lot of time together. And then it was a strong enough bond that we were able to maintain it over the last now 20 years.
So many years Eric and I have been friends, and yes, lots of stories. Just one tiny thing. Eric showed up at my house dressed as a very skinny Santa Claus at one point. It's not really a story. It's just a good, fond memory.
Yeah. On that same trip, I went to a stranger's house because I was doing all kinds of houses, and it was going to my aunts and my cousins, and just going, and every family member and friend I could think of was just going to their house. And I was coming out of their house, and there was a next door neighbor outside yelling Santa Claus. And this would totally not fly today, but in the 90s, I just went over there, and all of a sudden I found myself in a house that was a holiday house party. And as I was in there giving candy to all these children, I could see all of the adults looking at each other being like, who is this guy in our house and who hired him? And I didn't, that was the same trip. But the best part of the story is on my way, I drove this avocado green Delta 88 Oldsmobile. And I was I was kind of known back then as being kind of out of my body a little bit. I was clumsy and a little bit, got a little caught up in the moment. And I was a little off center. And when I backed out of the driveway, I backed my car into a light post and smashed my taillights out. And I looked at the house, and I could see all the adults from all these stranger adults whose house I just home invaded, looking out the window, seeing Santa Claus smash his car into a light post without any real meaningful obstruction. Other than just, it was a bad 10 minutes.
That's a way to leave an impression.
Yeah. I'm sure to this day, they're like, do you remember that weird thing that happened that one Christmas?
That's great, because I actually don't remember that story, if I ever knew it. Yeah. I know other ones, but not that one. So
I know it was the same day as that I went to you, because I've only done that once.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, I had a Santa suit one year. It wasn't like a regular tradition for me. It was one day, and I just went to as many friends as I could that day.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Billy, would you like to induct him into the Scratch Claw Push Club with our thing?
Yes, our thing. So I gave you a 2-minute warning on this, but we want to have you give your CV. Just give us the highlight reel in 60 seconds, and I will time it. I'll cut you off.
Okay. So
And
no
then
visible clock. I've got to
no
just
visible clock. You gotta, feel it. If
Unfortunately, we don't have the effects budget for that just yet, but I mean, maybe.
Fair enough. Fair
And
enough.
crossed.
the thing is, you're an actor. You know how it is. Like, if you're doing a voiceover, you kind of start to feel what a minute feels like, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
15 seconds, you got it. Okay. So I'm going to start it, and timer will go off at the end. And ready?
Yes. Let's go.
Okay, go.
Okay, so I was a fundamentalist Christian kid raised in the church until about 16 when I discovered community theater, met some great friends, got inspired to pursue the arts, went to Up With People, traveled the world with this international cast, which led me to going to school for entertainment, and came out of it, spent a long time in New York City as a entertainer at Ellen Stardust Diner, and worked in the cruise ship industry for a while, traveled around the country doing regional theater until I started my own production company that has now blown up into a multi-city operation with about 70 employees that does corporate consultation and improvisation for content creation and, of course, live entertainment in a couple of venues. And now we are bent on conquering the world and moving into new spaces where we can continue to innovate using the power of improvisation. How's that?
Wow, everybody ends up having 4 seconds left so far. I'm really impressed by this. It's like people can feel a minute, I feel like. So yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
I think especially if you've done like TV or theater, there's this weird internal clock you develop after some time. I know that there've been times, because I've worked in TV for so many years, like I could just get up and go do stuff and then manage to like come back right about the time the commercial's over. Because I can get used to just feeling that time.
Yeah, 60 seconds is a real kind of, I do think that 1 minute is a very embedded time frame. I think if you would have said 45 or a minute 15, probably would have missed it by a mile.
Throws you off just enough.
Yeah. Cool. Well, where should we start? There's so many places to start. So, I mean, this podcast is really about people like clawing out a space for their creativity. And I think, you and I have known each other long enough that I know how much you've done in doing that and found a way to. Let's start with Up With People, because honestly, that was one of those things that for me at the time was just mind-blowing, that you spent a whole year working your butt off to save $15,000, right?
Right.
That was the amount, right?
Yep.
So you could go travel and work.
Yeah.
So you paid to go work and travel with this group, and it was an amazing experience.
Yeah.
But not many people would do that, probably. So tell us about getting ready for that, first off.
Yeah, that's I never really quite framed it that way, which is interesting, because I hear you say it that way, and it's like, yeah, that's what happened. That's exactly what it was. But I think that maybe speaks to why I got out of it what I did. Because even though the work to get there, I did a job with a company called McVeigh Tent and Expo. I don't mind throwing them under the bus. They were about one of the worst companies that you could ever work for. I'd be shocked if anybody from that company ever listened to this interview, but if they did, hey guys, boom. But they were terrible. I mean, it was like a working all day, no breaks. It was the 90s, I was a teenager, but it was like building stages and tents outside. And I was on overtime every week by Tuesday, by Tuesday night. It was just like, or by Wednesday, it was just insane amount of work. But there was this deadline. So I was young, I had a lot of energy, and there was this deadline that I needed to have this money by. So there was just never a choice. And that part of preparing was terrible. It was one of the worst summers ever. I mean, Billy, you were my friend through all of that. I think I had a period where there wasn't a day off in a month and a half. I worked every single day, but I was making so much money on overtime. By the time I got to midweek, I was like, now I really gotta rack up these dollars, all to put it into this organization that was essentially a musical that you did with a group of 100 other people from all 20 or 30 different countries. But once you were there, once you were on tour, you were staying with host families, you were traveling with these great people, you were getting tremendous repetitions in front of audiences of all kinds. And I can't even begin to underscore how important that experience was in refining my creative voice, creating a sense of fearlessness on stage, and giving me a confidence that I could do whatever I really wanted to do. So yeah, it was a crappy couple of months at McVeigh's, but wouldn't have ever, once I was there, it didn't feel like you didn't pay for it. It was like a tuition. It was a student program. But it didn't feel like I had to pay for it. It felt like I just got to do this thing that was really, really fun.
So, but so I remember you coming back because you came back and you performed in Nina, and I met, well, of course, David, and then,
yeah.
Now I forgot her name. My
brain.
Julie, right. So, and we all went strawberry picking. And I remember when you were there, like, hearing you talk about the experience and about what your days were like or your weeks were like, of like pulling into a city, having to set everything up, meeting your host family, having to sort of be entertained, not entertained by, but entertain your host family, because you had to be, like, hey, we're grateful that you're, hosting us. And then setting up for the show, doing the show, doing maybe it again, maybe you'd be there one night or two nights, and then you would move into, take everything down and move on to the next city and do it all over again.
Yep. Don't forget, there usually wasn't another day that we did community service in the community.
Forgot about
that. So it was a grind. It was a grind, and not something I would recommend for anybody over the age of 26, probably. But you every day that you were in that program, you were meeting amazing people. You were going to unbelievable places. There were so many experiences that were on all ends of the spectrum, from staying in host families that were impoverished to staying with host families that were unbelievably wealthy. Performing in venues that were outdoor amphitheaters. We did a show in Massachusetts, Fall River, Massachusetts, for 45,000 people. Outdoor, giant, felt like the Super Bowl in front of the USS Missouri. And then we did a show in Tok, Alaska, in a ice arena for 400. So it's just like this massive, massive cultural experience. And so the food and the places you got to see, and all of it just was like, every day was exhausting, but you couldn't wait till the next thing. And you'd sleep on the bus. It was a bus and truck tour, so it's like, get up every day, ride the bus for 9 hours, go to the new city, and start over again in these little 24 to 72 hour turnarounds over and over and over again. But then you're in Europe, so now you're in Switzerland and in Germany and France and Liechtenstein and Luxembourg and Denmark. Oh my gosh, now you're back in, it's just like, it's just so exciting, So you come back, and I was drained. I took a good 4 or 5 months to recover after the tour. But then I was like, I knew that I could never stay in Wisconsin. It changed the whole trajectory of my life.
Yeah.
So would you say, you've mentioned about doing a lot of corporate stuff, and one of your main gigs today is live in front of an audience. Did you look back on that experience and kind of take a lot of stuff away from that, having to go and constantly win over a new audience every so often, or having to, if you're trying to work with people, having to do a lot of work with people you may have only just met from city to city? Right.
I think another thing that was a real sort of unintended but impactful learning experience was open-mindedness to how different people can be, and kind of approaching every relationship with a sense of curiosity, because I think that just kind of opens up. If you're actually emotionally listening to people when you communicate with them, you can speak to them the way they need to be spoken to if it's an entertainment, to connect with them comedically, or to connect with them dramatically, or if it's in a business sense, to truly hear what it is they are looking for in this engagement so that you can give it to them. And so it's just kind of, I think that's what was a big part of the experience. In our case, it was literally people from different cultures or speaking English as a second language, or people coming from very, very liberal places or very, very conservative places. Just you just, because you just got to kind of practice it over and over again. Every 3 days, it was you were thrown into a new pot of soup, and you had to figure out what the ingredients were and how everything kind of mixed together and how you could fit in and make it work. And every audience is different. You know this if you work in comedy, like every audience is a different chemistry. And so if you kind of set yourself into a mindset of delivering exactly the same thing, it can often lead to a less than stellar result. And it has a lot to do with how we approach improv as an organization, because it's just like you got to listen and you got to take a minute to kind of absorb what they're giving to you, because it will color the way you communicate with them.
Eric, do you find, because you've worked in restaurants basically your whole adult life, just like I have, because Eric started working at his best friend's dad's restaurant back home, and now owns a restaurant currently. And so both of us have, we also work together at a 50s diner right out of high school. So he and I have a similar background in that sense. Don't you think that being a server lends to that too, of like having to listen to people and make connections really quickly?
Yes, totally. Absolutely. It's a little different for me because I feel like cynicism can really creep in quickly. And I think that's a poison pill. So like I haven't worked in a restaurant since like 2014, 2013. But and now I'm working in a restaurant in a different capacity. But I remember towards the end of that, really sort of taking people and in my brain and transforming them into products, turning them like in losing a little bit of I think you've known me for a long time, Billy, but I think sort of one of my leading sort of personality quirks is I really enjoy talking to people and connecting with people. I think it's really great. And I knew something was kind of off when I found myself not wanting to do that anymore, because I know it's core to who I am and how I navigate the world. So that's when I started to realize that I got to get out of here, because it's breaking me.
Would you say that has to do with, without saying, but like has to do with you being treated as a product
Totally.
in that circumstance?
100%, and the ownership of the organizations that I work for. This doesn't the Nakashimas, who is what Billy was referring to. They're a great company, and they gave me my first opportunity to learn, and they were super supportive and flexible, and I love them. Would do anything for them. If they said, look, we got a tough week, can you come up to Wisconsin and do a few shifts? I would say yes in a heartbeat. But the restaurant that I worked for the longest period of time and was in Times Square in New York, and it was truly a turn and burn, make as much money as quickly as possible, and without question was a very exploitative organization as it related to the talent. A few years after I left the organization, they actually unionized, and it's a lot better. And so there's a lot of cool things that have happened there since. But I was there in the rough time, in the rough days. The money was great. There was a lot of real positives that came out of it. The exposure could be great. There were awesome memories and experiences, but yeah, they definitely viewed the talent as a means to keep drawing in these tourists. And without the talent, the tourists wouldn't have come, but the talent was not compensated for their talent. They were just like every other server. So that's just wild to me now in hindsight.
So your main gig these days is a thing called BATSU. Explain that to our listeners for anyone who may not already be initiated.
Well, I need to can I massage that a little bit?
Absolutely.
So my main thing is Face Off Unlimited, which is the primary stakeholder in BATSU. BATSU is our sort of mothership entertainment program. It's a live BATSU game show. And it's if you don't know what a BATSU game is, if you've ever seen Genki no Tsukai or Downtown or Silent Library, in the end of the aughts, there was a bunch of shows that came out of Japan that were really popular in America, and that was about the time that we started the show, which are these sort of wild Japanese game show styled entertainment pieces that usually involve some sort of challenge and then some sort of embarrassment or punishment or some terrible thing that happens to the participants. Genki no Tsukai almost works like Big Brother, where it's like a house and there are cameras everywhere, and if they go to the bathroom at a certain time of night, a bunch of guys come out of the walls and start beating them with rubber bats or something, and it's just, and they're half asleep, and it's just, it's like they're locked in this house. There are a bunch of things that they do, but they're kind of our inspiration. And at the time we were asked to do some work, not work, but we were doing a fundraiser in this noodle house in the East Village, actually for Brianna Davis. Do you remember her? So another person from the community, another performer from the community that Billy and I grew up in, and she was doing this fundraiser, and she asked my partner and I to come in to do our act because they needed to fill up this slate for this fundraiser. And we did the act, and the owner of the restaurant was like, "I love you guys. You guys got to do something here." And there's a long story that goes behind how it actually happened after that, but ultimately, we decided that we needed to put something in that fit that space, which is where we came up with the BATSU game idea.
No, can I ask, was that the fish?
Pardon? No.
Was I there for that? Was that the fish? And because I remember the fish very viscerally.
Nope, the fish was before that.
Okay. It feels like it kind of,
totally.
into that.
No, I mean, there are thematic threads throughout my whole life that seem to have been leading. The fact that the first job was at a Japanese restaurant, essentially, and now we own a Japanese restaurant, so it's very interesting how that kind of happened. But yeah, that fish act was just, I think, an idea we got after getting stoned some night, and we're like, let's give it a try. I think we've only done it that once, so but I guess that we're speaking vaguely around it, so I should just we did early in our but it does inform, I guess, how our brand of comedy was, which was just we wanted to try things. Let's just try stuff. It was such a great creative place to be in as a young artist, because we didn't care if people liked it or not. We thought it was funny, so we'd throw it in front of an audience, and we did that with tons and tons of acts. And we had a show out in Long Island that had been running for a couple of years that had rabid fans, with just lines down the block to get into our show every week. That was just at this little regional theater in Long Island, where we were using their black box space. And that venue, because it was our show, we just kind of went in every week with some sort of new creative idea. And sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. Our audience loved it no matter what. It was just us that walk away and be like, "Oh, that was garbage. That was not good," But this act that Billy's referring to was one where we thought it would be funny if somebody did basically an oral report on the slowly diminishing Alaskan salmon population, while another comedian stand on the other side of the stage, and a third comedian hit him in the chest repeatedly with an Atlantic salmon. It was weird. Didn't make any sense. I guess the idea in our brain was like, oh yeah, this is like us having the salmon punish us back for the punishing we've done to the salmon. That was like the conceit of the piece. For everybody in the audience, people in the front row were just getting hit by sort of pieces of fish as this thing was disintegrating, and I was the person who was getting hit with a fish. And it was scaly, so it was cutting my skin. I was bleeding. It was a whole thing because we didn't dry run it with a real fish. had fish guts all over the stage. It was just a total mess. But what I love about it, and I think it's so funny that that sticks to you, Billy, because it's such an insignificant part of the kind of different pieces that we did, but I think it does speak to just us kind of being like, let's just do it, let's just do it and see how they like it.
The reason it sticks is because, for you, you've had so many of these experiences. And for me, it's, I happen to be in New York visiting you. And Eric's like, hey, we're going to go to the basement of this little bar and somewhere in, in New York City. And
beat
yeah,
the
by
shit
the
out
way,
of
we
each
have
other
a
with
fish.
some fish.
I have a video of it somewhere, although it's if I can find it, it would be terrible quality because it was on a very old camera, but I did video it. I remember this. Also, it was very dark.
I would love to see it. I would love to see if I still think it's kind of shitty. I'm really glad we did it. And
it may have colored your experience of the thing of being the guy that's getting beaten with the fish. So it might be a lot funnier to everyone else.
Right. Well, and that was the idea is that we I think that does lead to BATSU in terms of like the idea that that watching, it's Three Stooges, watching kind of these terrible things happen to people is funny, but it's only funny if there's a sense of consent in it. If there's a sense of
otherwise it's assault.
Yes, right, and that's a fine line, and it feels like a high risk because you don't. It's so easy to step onto that space of the audience being like, "Holy shit, should we be calling someone?" And I guess in our sort of comedic philosophy, the way that we sell that is with a sense of joy and play and like enthusiastic. Yes, just an enthusiastic. Okay, let's go.
Honestly, that's the word I would use to describe you. If I had to pick one word, it would be enthusiasm, because like Eric was always sort of the ringleader of his group of friends. I mean, to me, I think so. Like you were the center of it all. Like you were the one who was planning like the rafting trips where one of us should have died, or or so many other things that we went and did. We're all around Eric being like, "Ooh, what if we did this?" Right? So.
Yep. I mean, I would say that's accurate. That is the not that I don't believe that I'm necessarily the leader of our group even, but I can definitely latch on to the idea that there's always been a through line of let's go, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is that's a big part of getting the most out of the time we have here.
I'm curious to know, like, what would be like one of the biggest hurdles that someone might not think of, like behind the scenes, for you to, to make something like BATSU and like a regular thing. Because it's one thing, it's one time, like you're going to do one bit where you're getting smacked with a fish. Then he says, okay, we want to make this like a regular show in this space, in this city, whatever. But I imagine there's probably some things going on behind the scenes to where you have to make that a continual reality.
Yeah, I mean, this is one really, really clear one, and I think everybody faces it, and that's the this is what I'm doing, thing, and this is not what I'm half doing. It's not what I'm trying to do. It's a shift, and I get so clearly why people are unable to get over that hump. Because I remember going through. I remember the day I went into the diner in Times Square and quit. I remember it and just being like, "There is nothing here. There's no safety net here," and then the subsequent 18 months of just nail biting and sleepless nights and full on anxiety. That's the step. That's where you step off the cliff. And I feel like every artist has to face that moment. And I certainly would not have been able to do that on my own. I believe in the product. We had people who were like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. But then we also just say, why are we doing this show and, a couple times a week and only 12 people are in the audience? And I do really believe in this sort of energetic commitment and return. It's such the risk curve is so extreme on that philosophy. So I understand when so many people just can't really bring themselves to do that. They have families, they have kids, they have rent, they have medical bills, they have whatever. So I was fortunate enough to be young and healthy and not have too much to put on the line, but nonetheless, it was everything that we put on the line. And we did have these small audiences, but it wasn't until we took that step that our audiences started to, it was crazy how it happened. It was like, we made those steps. We were like, we know it's a good product. We know it's a good show. We know it has a high ceiling. That was what we knew. And there was conviction before we made those decisions individually. But then once we did it, then it was this slow build. Now it's not 12 people in the room, it's 22. Now it's 33. Now our tickets are no longer $8. Now they're 15. Now they're 30. Now they're 40. Now they're 60. Now they're 70. Like, it's like in every step, every time we made that decision to add another night or to raise the ticket prices or to redouble down on the investment we made in ourselves, every step, it was like, are we making the biggest mistake here and blowing up a good thing? And every time it worked out. So I think it's like embracing the risk.
I love that.
So like you started in New York and now you're in Chicago. Was that another one of those moments, or was it like an even bigger kind of like that kind of like recoil moment where it's like, oh, okay, I know we've done really well here, but now it's like another city. It's like a whole, like you got to go conquer a whole other kingdom out there.
Yeah, and totally different because we had, yes. I mean, so by the time we made the decision to move to Chicago, the show in New York was selling out every performance. And we were getting every reviewer that was coming in was like, this is the greatest thing to do in New York City. So we just felt like we had the wind at our backs. Like we felt like we had been constantly tweaking and refining the show to make it exactly what we wanted it to be. And basically, but we were still living in poverty, and so we're like, the only way we can't add more nights. We've got a full docket. The only thing we can do is add more inventory. So the only way we can add more inventory is expand to a different city, because we're not going to do two venues in the same city and compete with ourselves. So, but then my brother, who lives in Chicago, was like, "You guys got to do the show here; it would crush." And I remember that conversation saying, "Wait, Chicago's second city. Chicago's Improv Olympic. Chicago are like so that's the imposter syndrome kind of creeping in." Mm-hmm. Because it's like, these are the real guys. These are the real ones. We're just these guys playing at comedy. And
yeah, because that was what I thought about when I heard you guys were in Chicago. I was like, oh man, that's where it's going to get. I mean, New York has always been known like it's an actor's hub, but like Chicago is that place where it's like, okay, if you're going to get into that kind of improv comedy space, this is where it's about to get real.
Right. And that is exactly how it felt.
But you know what I would have said to you had we talked at that time and you had said that, I would have been like, yeah, but Eric, remember what I said when I talked about New York a long time ago, and you were like, I was saying, oh, New York, there's so many great actors there, and I don't know if I could compete at that level. And Eric was like, yeah, but there are people getting into shows, Broadway, off Broadway, who are not that good. Like, there's just a lot more theater, and there's a lot more people. But that doesn't mean, right? Yeah. That doesn't mean all of them are fantastic either.
Yeah, right? I mean, you can see just as many crappy, off Broadway shows in New York as anywhere else. But one thing you can do in New York, and I think I remember this conversation, but I think I remember saying that the one thing you do in New York is you can audition every morning. Mm-hmm. You can, if you have the will, you can do it. You can find an audition for some student film or some off Broadway no pay run, and yeah, it's a miserable life, but you're building a rep, you're building experience, you're learning, you're finding your creative voice. Mm-hmm. and there's a reason why you hear these stories of these people like Morgan Freeman who grind for decades, doing local stuff, and then all of a sudden break out in their 40s or 50s. It's because they've been spending all that time refining and just learning themselves, which is
Mm-hmm.
really what your 20s as an artist, I feel like, is all about.
Do you
And
feel so that also strengthens kind of the muscle, like to do what you do now, having to go out that improv is just, I think there's definitely, I see a thing with the artists, just especially actors in general, that's just such a brutal, like a assault on your ego. Like, cause it's one thing, like if you're playing music, it's like, okay, maybe they don't like the notes I'm hitting, or if you're painting, they don't like that paint that I put on this canvas. But when you're getting rejected as an actor, it's like, no, they don't like me.
Yep. 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 Almost can't even add to that. Like, that's all true. And it's really brutal. And the only way to overcome that, I feel like, is just, you really have to love it. You really have to love it. And I think it's okay for people to fall out of love with it. And I think sometimes people just say, you know what, it's not worth it. But our answer to that was, nobody can tell us no if it's ourselves getting ourselves the work. And so we stepped out of the matrix, I feel like, when we started our production company, because it was like, and we knew the product was good because it was us doing it and giving it to the people, and we were getting direct feedback from the people. And that's what formed our collective creative voice as an organization. And from there, it was just about, how do we get as many people, get to as many people as possible. It stopped being like, can I get a job? And it started to be, how can I get what we do in front of people? Because if they see it, they're going to like it. It's just a whole different way of approaching the work.
So with
I'm
that,
curious. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Billy.
I was going to ask about, what, like, have you guys been on morning shows? Have you, because you have these two great shows. I mean, obviously you don't need it, but like, publicity never hurts. So I'm just
Right.
curious,
So
like,
we very intentionally don't. We've been, what's happened, that's just, this evolution of technology has served us so well.
mm,
If you look us up on TikTok, or on Instagram, that's where the word of mouth
mhm,
spreads in a way that it never did before. And we wouldn't want the name of our show on the side of a bus, or in a bus stop, or on
right.
the radio, or on TV. We don't, because that, in our opinion, that's what makes us sell out. It's just, we're not cool anymore.
Your
And
secret.
what's cool is, if and we don't need to push it, because we sell out pretty much every show anyway. So it's just like, we as long as we have to field emails on a Saturday between 2 and 4 saying, do you have anything left? Is there any way I can get in? And we have to say, sorry, we'll put you on the list. As long as that's happening, we're not going to spend $1 of advertising revenue. And we don't, but we have done a couple of like spends on TikTok and on Instagram for brand alignment. And it's mostly for endorsement. Like, we know that we have this bicultural product.
Mm-hmm.
Our ownership we're majority AAPI owned now, but our company is half AAPI, both Japanese nationals and Japanese Americans, and then people who are non-Asian, who work together to create this product and serve different roles to make sure it's authentic and is cool. But sometimes on the surface, people who see our product don't know that. We don't have the opportunity to sit them down with a coffee and say, hey, so let's tell you the story, how this came together, and
Mm,
what our values are as an organization. They just look at it and they say, oh, I see white people wearing Japanese headbands. And they're like, that's kind of messed up. And we could have that conversation. We could lay it all out and walk away feeling really, really great. But we can't. So we have a couple times partnered with like Japanese influencers. Just said, hey, look, come to the show, say what you want to say. We'll buy you tickets. We'll buy you dinner. We'll, if your time is valuable, we'll pay you to just come look. And if you like it and you like the product, talk to us. Make sure you talk to us and let us contextualize any questions you might have. And it's worked really, really well. Ultimately, they walk away saying, this is an organization that puts employing AAPI talent first and foremost. We pay our actors, our improvisers, more than we believe we're the highest paying improv company in the entire world. And and we have several people who survive, who pay their rent in New York on their BATSU salaries. So whereas I know other companies in the other companies in the country that can't even muster $20 or $15 a performance for their talent.
It does kind of that whole this train of thought leads me into what I was going to ask before. The idea of kind of juggling multiple roles, because like obviously you started out as an actor, but at some point you got to put on the producer hat and you got to start making like these marketing decisions or being answerable to like the AAPI issue. Someone's like, oh, you're culturally appropriating this Japanese game show, and it's a very, I mean, maybe, I don't know, like, does one role feed into the other, or like, does it help, or do you just kind of have to like shift gears in some way to kind of, put on that producer hat or take off the actor hat, or is there,
no,
is it?
Yeah, they're different. And what I'll say is that stepping into the producer role really helped me help manage my ego challenges as an actor and all of the things that kind of kept me awake at night, the imposter syndrome stuff, because when you're making producerial decisions, it really is about keeping this thing alive, keeping it going, keeping your talent happy, keeping the audience happy, making sure the product is maintained or is improving. It almost, the ego comes out of it, I feel like, because it's like solving a Rubik's Cube. And all of a sudden now, because I still perform in the show, I'm doing a couple shows this week. I'm performing tomorrow night and the next night. And, but now it's almost like, oh, I've got to go in and perform, but it's like, it's no longer, am I going to go in and be good, or am I going to not be good? Am I going to get out of the performance and criticize myself and think about what I could have done better? And that actor part of me is just like, just go out there, be present, try not to think about the production and just try to play. And then it's a different, I approach it all very differently. Now it's just almost like I catch myself in the show seeing that there might be an issue between a server and a table. And I'm like, wait, I'm supposed to be a comedian right now. Like stop wondering if they got their edamame on time, So it helped, because I feel like a lot of the stuff that gets in performers' way is the ongoing battle with ego.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I remember my acting teacher, I think there, maybe you could speak to this too because you have a child now. So I think my acting teacher said, like, a lot of times when people become parents, they become better actors too, because they have to stop focusing on themselves quite so much. So
Mm-hmm.
it's that introspection that is harmful when it becomes too much. When it's too much introspection, too much narcissism, you get to harming yourself as an actor as opposed to just trying to affect the other person, right? And so, do you think that has helped you as well?
Yep. I think, and now, of course, I'm going to come on here and advocate that every actor should be fluent in improv. But one thing with improv, my partner Joe always, I think the number is 8%. He always said the magic 8%, which is 8% of improv is great. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that number, but I do feel as though it's a very tangible way to kind of say, we're going to go up there and we're going to do this work, and then we're going to throw it away. Like, we're not going to sit here. It's okay to like have a beer afterwards and say, oh, that moment, what were you thinking? Or did I get a right read on that? Or even to say, you know what? I said something and then I went back into my head and I started thinking about what I said and I no longer was present. So the next 4 or 5 moments I was not there, and then all of a sudden I was panicking, and then I started sweating, and then I was like, wait, this thing is moving on without me. I don't know what's going on anymore. And identifying, oh, this thing happened. And sometimes that can be part of the growing process, but letting that shit go truly. And then saying, it's like what they say in football, right? Cornerbacks, secondaries in football have to have the shortest memory of any position. They big thing. It's a sport where those people are most culpable for the biggest failures in any sort of a game. They're the ones that carry the biggest, I guess quarterbacks too, but like they have these moments where they could lose the game because of what they did or the way that they came up short, and the stakes couldn't be higher on the professional level. And I think about that. I think about, these young guys who are playing cornerback at 23 years old for a professional football team in front of 50 million people. And what kind of brain thing are they dealing with when they trip and a ball goes over their head and a receiver scores a 70-yard touchdown and the team loses in the last 30 seconds of the game? And they're a 22-year-old kid. Their brains aren't even fully developed yet. And I think you always hear that mantra. You gotta let it go. You gotta forget.
Or as Ted Lasso says, be a goldfish.
Be a goldfish. Yeah. Yeah. So that's exactly it, and I think actors could, I think of all the acting training I ever got, and I don't think I can remember a single teacher that ever said that to me.
That's something that I've thought about a lot is, this idea that people focus too much on doing something perfectly and not on just doing more. And like all the studies that are coming out is like, doing more work. And I think actually you said this to me a long time ago of just, I talked about going to school and taking classes for acting, and you're like, well, why not learn while you're doing it? Because that was always your philosophy. And so I think that people who are just out there going, I'm just going to keep doing and do as much of it as I can and not try to be perfect every time. Like, yes, I'll try to do my best, but also I'm not going to, there's a point of diminishing returns. If you do 197 takes of something, you're not going to get a better product.
Right.
So there has to be a point where you go, yes, I did my best, and now I'm going to move on to the next thing. Because otherwise you get those people who like write one screenplay, but then keep rewriting it for like 15 years.
Right.
And they might produce it 3 separate times trying to get a better product. It's like, why don't you just move on to the next one? Why don't you try something new?
Yeah, and it's totally possible to throw your work out there. It's totally okay to throw your work out there and be embarrassed about it. You get a little burn from the touching the burner in that immediate moment. You're like, ooh, hey, that's not. And it's okay to be human, and it's okay to let that be a part of your journey. I think you could probably find really crappy outtakes from every major star that's out there, along their journey. And I bet you I know they all have work that they're like, oh, what was I doing there? But they moved on and they kept going. And I just think that, I love TJ Jagodowski. I don't know if you guys TJ and Dave are like the premier 2-man improv group in the world, in my opinion. And they they released a book recently about how they approach improvisation, and there's a real stress on taking joy, like in true, like the thing that they're chasing is finding true joy in the moment, like in like existing in it. That like the source of happiness in all of this work is in the present. And that's just achieving a true sense of the present, and which is just like, we think we're present, but how can we be more present? I'm in this interview with you both, but could I be more present? Is there a way that I could really try to read your faces a little bit better and try to understand how you're feeling, and hence respond in a way that is even more succinct or more speaks to where you're at, and just getting more and more present, And I just think that's such a cool philosophy.
Yeah, it's one of the things I have like such respect for, comedians or people who can do improv and be good at it, because I feel that's almost that writer brain kicking in. But for you guys, it's like you got to get it right there in the moment. Is that what that mindset, what you're using to fuel that? Or do you actually are you just kind of like out in the world and you see like a thing and you go, oh, that's kind of cool, I'm gonna file that away for that moment, just the right moment?
Yeah,
What's
so both, yeah, parts of that, all of that. Yeah, you always have to be listening and reading and learning, and you got to know what's going on in pop culture. You got to know what's going on in the world and politics, and then I think to be able to doing, we call it operating at the top of your intelligence, which is just you need to, yeah. When especially I've been teaching for years, and you see these students come in and they go to the basest, easiest humor, thinking it's going to be funny, some comedian that they saw that they liked, and they mimic this sort of crassness for the sake of crassness, when they don't understand that that works for that comedian because of everything else that makes up that comedian and their voice. And it's this flops after flops, and you try to convince them that that's not the way to go. But I feel like that the answer is not this. The script writing thing is always there. It's always battling, but it's an ego item. We do this great game to open BATSU called Conducted Story. It's a famous improv short form game. And this conductor points at different people. And every subsequent person has to pick up where the last person left off. And I just think it's such an awesome, awesome metaphor for everything, for all of it. Because you get a title of a story, and we start, and this person starts, and they start on a thread in your brain. You're like, oh, I can add on that thread, and I'm really excited, and please point at me. And then they point at someone else, and someone else adds on that thread, and it goes in a completely different direction. And then you have a decision to make at that point, which is, do I really want to try to shoehorn that thing that I had in my brain in? Because yes, with the first piece of information, it was completely relevant and non-contradicting what was happening, and was funny, and funny to me, and I think the audience will think it's funny. Or do you completely discard it? And look at this new information and actually get excited? And I think it speaks to a tool that can be developed, which is a spirit of collaboration and a spirit of, yes and is thrown around so casually, and I don't know that I totally am on board with like yes and in all contexts, because
ever throw a no but at somebody just to kind of see how they react?
No but can be a yes and, but that's a conversation for a whole other podcast. Yeah, I think there's joy in saying, oh my gosh, this new idea is really great, and too. And then somebody else speaks and they add to it. And as long as everybody is in a group, is doing that, is able to achieve that mindset, 100% of the time, it'll be transcendent. It'll be transcendent because everybody has ownership over the outcome. And you get done with a game like that where everybody is doing it the right way from the right source, and you just want to hug everybody when it's done. It's like there's an emotional thing that kicks in that's just like, we did that, and we did something amazing, and the audience is laughing. And to them, it was magic. How did these people do it? Because inside their own minds, they were also doing the same thing, except they're not able to let go of their ideas. And that's what separates us from the pack.
Do you find that that's a hard lesson for some actors to learn? I think just as any artist, I think there's that inevitable bit of ego that we want, like, see me, but sometimes having to realize that the other guy's success is not necessarily your failure. And then you get on it's the artistic version of, like, the rising tide lifts all ships.
I mean, yeah, I think it's a huge challenge. And I think there are some fields that I couldn't possibly, I don't think I could succeed in, because they seem to be, from my perspective, to be such solo flight things where everybody is a perceived enemy. I think that's why I ended up where I am, in doing the kind of work that I do, because that collaboration, the high from that is the high from going out on a stage with a couple of colleagues and building something together where everybody had a hand in it, is so much higher than any single commercial gig or film gig I've ever booked, where I'm just going there, I'm doing work, I'm proud of the work, I feel like, yeah, I really nailed that. There's no one is like full on ecstasy, and I think that speaks to humanity. I think, It speaks to how people work in allyship and create. It's the expression, the total is greater than the sum of its parts. I think that is a real thing. And so I guess my message for artists is just it's like what you're doing with this podcast. Find people with like-minded who can work together, who want to be involved in something exciting, something where you have the same vision. Make sure you get to the details of what the vision is, and don't just let it be this broad vision, but more of a nuanced, this is what we want to do. And then I think if you got multiple people facing in the same direction with the same objective, you can achieve something more than what you could ever do alone. And I think that's the key to my company's success. I think it's the key to a great improv scene. And I think it's the key to a fulfilling career. So.
This is why we're friends, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Because I agree with everything you just said about the most fulfilling things I've done in my career. I kind of stopped doing stage a few years back to focus on voiceover, and I love voiceover. I do. But it's very lonely. It is a very solitary thing, and it has made me realize more now than ever that, like, when I go back, because I do intend to go back to doing theater and maybe some film, but when I do, it's going to be on my terms, and it's going to be to create the things that I want to create. So the things that really made me love what I was doing were never in service of like a director or a theater company's, oh, they're doing this show and they're going to do their show. It was always, we're creating this together. So improv, commedia dell'arte, and devised theater. Those are the things that really, really made me so excited to be a part of it. And like you said, it was magical,
Right.
to work.
It's so funny. I think about us as kids, and I think about those community theater productions. The stakes were so low. I would just to go back and see those productions, like to be able to see and I think I would take away that my adult professional critical eye would not be able to see past the lack of quality. And that I feel like I know that about myself, and I find that tragic.
Yeah.
Because I know I can still very viscerally remember what it felt like. And you talked about all the work I did to go to Up With People and work, but in my mind, there was no difference in Up With People from the community theater. And both we were working,
Right.
and both we were giving 110%.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody can take that away from us. And in both, we were showing up for rehearsals. We were doing 3-hour, choreo rehearsals, and we weren't getting paid a penny. And we loved every second of it. And it wasn't even like an exhausting, like, I don't want to come to the next rehearsal. It was, I can't wait to see everybody again and continue to work. And I feel like it's really fascinating how we get past college and we get into our respective industries, and the love slowly drains, and it's the pressure of being an adult and all the things that we have to do to survive. And that makes sense, but also cynicism creeps in, and it's like, how do we go back to the joy? How do we find our way back to just loving it so much?
Well, and I think it goes to what you said. It's figure out what it is you love about it. When I was younger, it was like, I want to do anything theater related. I want to do all of it, right? And then you start to realize it's like, oh, did I really love that as much? Or did I really, was that the thing that really, or can I be more specific about what it is that I love and what I want to pursue? Because there's a million niches in this industry,
right,
that you can go after.
And I think we all have to remind ourselves all the time that we're in this field because we know what the alternative is. And as difficult as the grind can be, as difficult economically as it can be, we all know that it's not in us to work a 9 to 5 in a cubicle for the rest of our lives, and to live for the weekends and for the whatever 2 weeks of vacation we get every year. Like the existential dread of that far outweighs the existential dread of going in front of a casting director and tripping onto my face.
Yeah, I have frequently, let's say, well, my full disclosure, my wife and a lot of her friends, the people they come out of the accounting world. Lovely people, some of the best people you'd ever hope to meet. But let me tell you, they're very different than us creatives. You go just kind of hang out with that crowd and just listen to their conversations versus the kind of weird off the wall conversations we can have. And you go, yeah, I like these people, but we are different.
They're vital.
And we need those. I'm not knocking them. We need, God bless them. We need them. But I've learned that because I guess it's something I took for granted, because ever since I was like in college and I kind of found my little wacky theater crowd that I kind of started hanging out with, and I've just kind of always been working in TV. That's usually just kind of like a haven for people who are really, taking that job because they want to be like writers or comedians or actors or musicians. So you're still around other creatives, but when you go hang out with people who are definitively not creatives, you notice a difference. And I'm saying that's a bad difference. It's just different.
Well, and I think even to extend further outside of the world of artists, like I think a lot of the issues in the world, just in the social dynamics of our country and the world are really rooted in people's unrealized dreams and the self-resentment for not pursuing their dreams. So it doesn't necessarily have to be I didn't put a band together. I play guitar great, but I never put a band together. It doesn't have to bridge into arts. It could be that I really wanted to, that I really, really wanted to be a paleontologist, but instead I went to school to be an attorney. And I because my parents or whatever, because I wanted to make money or I wanted to be secure. And then 30 years later, you're like, wait a second, I'm not happy, but now I'm too far in. So I think the bigger thing is just do what you want to do. Don't do what you think you should do, or what the world tells you, is the best, safest, most secure path. Do what makes you happy. And if it makes you happy, you'll figure it out. You figure out a way to do it.
If it makes you happy, you're going to put more into it. Yeah. Right. In general. I mean,
Yep.
Yeah. It's a great point. As we wrap up, is there anything else you would say to people? Because I think you just kind of hit on it is, with this podcast, we're kind of exploring the people who, really just kept at it and keep at it no matter what. So if you were going to give advice to someone who is graduating this year, what advice would you give them?
I would say find like-minded people and work together, find a core. And it doesn't even have to, it can be friends, but it doesn't even have to be your friends. Find people, friendships will develop, but find people who see you for your art and want to do the kind of stuff that you want to do, because I just feel like it's all in collaboration. It's all in help. It's all in having somebody else carry the load when you can't. And that is that's the single thing I attribute to our team. We have our original team. Well, now we have 70 people who work for our company, but when we started, it was 3. And those 2 guys, are each of us in turn have had horrible things happen in our lives that were would have, I think in any case, completely been an abrupt stop to any momentum we had professionally. And would have ended, took us off map for not a week, not for 2 weeks, but 4 months. And in every case, the other 2 kept carrying the bucket, and that made all the difference. So find people who want to find partners, find people who want to work with you, and don't try to do it alone, and it'll pay massive dividends.
Cool. Yay.
I find I cannot argue with that at all. Believe me, it's having worked on the projects I have, I've learned the value of good collaborators. You know, even if it's only a small number. So, man, thanks for coming out and sharing your time. Tell the people where they can find you online if they want to get at you.
Sure. FaceOffUnlimited.com. We produce all kinds of shows, BATSU being one of them. But FaceOffUnlimited.com also leads you to Fold, which is our face-off learning and development, our corporate training program. We work with awesome corporations and can help really add to the conversational and interpersonal dynamics within an organization. Check out BATSUlive.com. It'll take you to Chicago or New York, or if you happen to be in Scotland, come visit us there. We're going to be there for the entire month of August at the Edinburgh Fringe, and we're going to be headlining a major theater there. So it's a huge opportunity for us, and fingers crossed it leads to a spring opening of BATSU in London. That's the dream. And if it doesn't happen, we'll come back here and talk about how we're pivoting. So
that's so exciting that you get to go to Edinburgh. That's amazing.
Yeah, please film some of that, because I imagine the Scots will bring some different stuff to it.
Yeah. We had a meeting with their PR team. It's a much different PR process there because you only got 30 days to sell tickets. So we're very excited. It's the team. We're bringing a great team out there. And we're just thrilled for the opportunity and the platform. And we know already before we left that we're going to crush it. We just know it. So it just can't come fast enough so that we can do our thing.
That's awesome. I can't wait to hear how that goes. So thank you so much for coming and talking to us, Eric. It's delightful to see you. So
of course, I always love seeing you. I wish you the best of luck with the podcast.
Thank you.
Go get it.
That will be all for this episode. To keep up with the show, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at ScratchClawPush. If social media isn't your thing, you can contact us at scratchclawpush@gmail.com. This podcast has been a Carcutta Media production. For a full list of our podcasts, go to carcuttamedia.com/podcasts. This recording, or any portion thereof, may not be reproduced or used in any manner whatsoever without the express written permission of the publisher, except for use of brief quotations in review. Copyright 2023 by Carcutta Media, LLC. All rights reserved.